Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Cup of Coffee, the show to go with your morning cup of coffee. I'm Aman, and this is my co host, Omer.
Hello everyone, how are you doing? So Aman, what have you been thinking about this week?
This week I have been. Huh. Well, I was swamped with work for like the last 3 months, and my contract just ended at work, so I have 20 extra hours in the week. So having that extra time, it's weird. So it feels weird because I have a lot to do, but it
Right.
doesn't feel like I have a lot to do. Sometimes because I'm not doing anything scheduled. I also feel like it's different getting yourself to do it versus when it's a deadline set by someone else. So it's been interesting the last few days. I still have a couple of things to do for them, but
hmm
it just feels weird having extra time in the week. But I guess I'll
Right.
just have to use it wisely now.
Yeah, I think like when you owe your time to someone else, you sort of feel a bigger obligation to do those things.
Hmm.
Cause like if cause like if you screw yourself over, generally speaking, you're just like, okay, it's my fault, you know. Uh, but like when you're expected to do something for someone else, a lot of the times you're just like, I can't mess this up because I mean, they'll get mad at me, and just you feel that obligation, not just because they're gonna get mad at you, but you just feel that obligation to that person to do what you said and they'd expect you to do.
Yeah, but I feel like that affects quality of work sometimes because I guess it's different for everyone. But for me personally, when I'm doing something for myself, it makes me feel like, oh, okay, this is special, especially if it's only mine, because that creates this special quality to it, and it makes me feel like I'm doing this for myself. Whereas if my parents tell me to do it or someone at work tells me to do it, then the quality isn't really there. Um, it just feels more special to me when I'm doing something for myself. And I mean, you can do cool projects and it makes it feel interesting because oh, I can show my friends once this is done and no one's going to see it coming, and it's not like doing something for someone else. It's like a podcast with my friend or the 20-hour project or a cool game that I'm trying to make. It's special to me because it's my own idea and my own creation.
Right. Uh, it's kind of that way for me, but like, the thing is, like, if you don't have motivation, like, all of the times you can't do stuff for yourself, like, you can't undertake your own personal projects. But like if you owe that to someone else, you might still be getting stuff done just because you feel you have that obligation to that person. You still will have some semblance of production in your life, even if you've lost a lot of your motivation just because you feel like you have to do it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. But how was your week, Umar?
My week's been pretty well. I've been thinking about a bunch of things. Something I was thinking about was you know how art and science, like a lot of the times we put them on sort of opposite spectrums. Like, that's sort of like science is like all the hard, cold facts and stuff, and art is just, creative expression, not really uh based in anything tangible, just more based in values and thoughts and stuff like that. But I was just thinking, does there need to be that distinction? Can something be both? And if so, are they really as opposite as we tend to believe?
For something to be considered, um, for something to be considered both science and art, I think I think it depends on your definition of art because do you consider art to be something that's visually or something that appeals to your senses, or does it just has to have meaning behind it? It really depends on how you consider art, or you could say that science is used to create art, the tools that you use to make art. um, are scientific at times, but it really depends on. I guess you could say if you're using the science creatively, because art tends to be creative, um, then you could say that yeah, this is a combination of science and art. But it's really difficult to say that something is both.
But like if you can, yeah, but like if you just consider art to be like creative expression, like would cooking be both a science and an art? Because you, because like you do express yourself creatively through cooking, through making out different recipes, altering the recipe. For a lot of people, cooking is one of their creative outlets, right? But like it's also a science because there's a lot of measurements, a lot of take techniques, and uh, there's a lot of logical thought into it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And then in that case, you would also consider sports and esports an art and a science because there's a lot of science that goes into those things. The art and science are no longer that far out. Like, for example, in basketball, when you're in the zone and you're really feeling it, or a professional player is really feeling it, and it's no longer in your head, then you're really just in the zone and you're playing, and it looks like an art. Um, then at that point it could be a science and an art because there's so many fundamentals behind what the player is doing, and they've put in the practice to get to this level, and it looks great. It looks like they're playing, and that's an art. But at the same time, there was so much science that went back into it to get them to this level, and that that at that point you could consider that both a science and an art. Um, if you aren't consider if you would say that it's more so an art, you could argue it either way, but I definitely think that that's the closest you would get to an overlap between both science and art is when
Right.
someone has gotten so good at both of these things, at the fundamentals and being in the zone, that it just it basically overlaps then.
So then is science a lot of the time basically the tools we use to creatively express ourselves through art? Because science is the science I feel like could be a lot of the times the techniques we develop the techniques and skills and tools we develop over the years that we use to express ourselves creatively. Because like,
I think you could definitely say
because
that because you could say that art is a way for us to make science more interesting to us because so someone that's more creatively inclined would not see science as something that's that interesting. Someone that's more scientifically inclined would not immediately see something that's creative and think that's interesting. But someone like me or you that's more creatively inclined would be able to see something scientific and say, "Oh, I can have some fun with this," and that gives us this ability to make it interesting for ourselves, and I think that's the cool thing behind art. That's what makes it fun to be creative. That's why this podcast is so great. That's why writing is so great whenever you do it, and it's just so interesting to us to use these tools to express ourselves creatively. That's why, going back to what we talked about earlier, it feels like I'm doing this myself. This is something that I'm creating, and it feels like when somebody tells you to do something, it's very structured. But when I'm doing it myself, then I feel like I'm creating something. It feels like a creative outlet. It feels like it's mine, and that's why creativity appeals to us more so. And it just makes it more interesting for someone who's more
right,
creatively inclined, but maybe not for someone who's not. So at the end of the day, it's just perspective.
right, because like I feel like because like a lot of the skills you develop to express yourselves creative you do so sort of scientifically like practicing shading or stuff like that. There's a technique to it. Like it almost like boils down to a science, but you use that technique to express yourselves creatively. So in that sense, I guess art and science are more linked than you think, just because science the science is just sort of how you're giving yourself the ability to be more creative.
I definitely agree, and I think that science doesn't necessarily always have to be the process of getting better at something. Sometimes it's there while you're expressing yourself creatively. Like you said with the shading, you know that is a that's there while you're undergoing that process of expressing yourself creatively. The science is there, the science of that shading. It still exists within that process, but it could also mean that like you practiced that to get so good at it that now it feels almost automatic, and you're expressing yourself creatively, and it doesn't even feel um, like the science is there, but in the background it still technically is there. But now you're having fun with it, now you're doing something interesting with it. And I guess it also depends on how much practice you've had, how much of that science was there, and how much is behind what you're actually doing. um,
Right.
because it is still there, no matter what creative outlet you're using. It just depends, like, okay, how much science went behind this. But I do have another question for you, actually, and this is an interesting one to me. When is it beneficial for a person to be naive, and when can that backfire for a person?
Uh, Beneficial for a person to be naive. Well, I guess the opposite of naivety is cynicism, right? So I guess uh, just managing to strike that balance is what we should all aim for, because you don't want to be so naive to the point where you trust everything and anything and everything people tell you or show you, just because there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of misinformation and people who are willing to use you out there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you get so cynical to the point where you don't really trust anything or anyone, that's just a miserable existence.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think, yeah, it is important to find that balance. And in terms of how it would backfire, I think a more naive person would obviously be willing to go into, like, trust people in terms of making a bad business decision, or getting themselves into something that they shouldn't be a part of. But I think a more cynical person would have less belief in themselves and how far they can go in accomplishing things.
I mean, I feel like naivety and cynicism is more about your belief in others. Uh, yeah, because a cynical person just does not trust anyone and just sticks to themselves most of the time. A naive person will just sort of attach and go along with pretty much everyone.
Okay, but then, and I know we always come back to this, but which of the two types of people that we have described is more likely to chase an ambitious dream?
I definitely a naive person, but if they're too naive, they might, if it doesn't succeed, then they might quickly go to the other side of the spectrum.
Okay, so you think that they would just end up moving between the two constantly?
I think yeah, I think it's a scale when people move uh, across it pretty much constantly. Like when things are going better for you, you tend to be more on uh, the naive side of the spectrum. But unless things have been going bad for you for so long, then you just get more and more cynical as things are going well for you because you just expect them to go poorly again.
Yeah. Is it possible, do you think, to have control of said scale between naivety and cynicism? Because, so the way that I think about it is, in my head, at least, it's better to be more ambitious, right? Which means that you can be naive when it comes to like thinking of your own abilities. But then, of course, it is beneficial to be a little bit cynical sometimes for your own safety. So, do you think, like, obviously, the best thing to do would be to, be able to be naive when you have to chase something that's very important, or you're doing something that doesn't really seem possible, but it's better to be cynical when it comes to things that relate to your own safety. So I guess, I mean, is that a point like on the scale, or do you think that it's possible to control the scale where you're cynical when you need to be and naive when you need to be?
Yeah,
Because
I think like the best mix is just leaning towards naive, but just enough cynicism mixed in there to the point where you aren't ta you don't let people take advantage of you, and also you know can anticipate some of the obstacles ahead. Because I mean, if you don't anticipate any of the obstacles and they hit you,
hmm
it you take that impact a lot harder than if you saw it coming.
yeah, I certainly think that the main benefit to being naive is being able to chase something a bit more ambitious, and the benefit to cynicism is that it's sort of like a defense mechanism, where
Mhm.
it keeps you from harm at times. And what's actually interesting about that is when mankind like first came into being, like millions of years ago, we obviously were not nearly as advanced, and so at that point, we were wired to keep ourselves safe, right? Which means that you would always take the option that keeps you safe, right? You always go for the safest option, right? And so it's kind of wired into our brains at this point to take that safe route, even in terms of like making life decisions. You would take the safer route because that's best for you right now. But the way that the world works right now, you're able to
Mhm.
take certain risks without having to worry about it backfiring. You're able to, like you have certain things to fall back on, but you're not as inclined to take these risks just because your brain is wired like, okay, I have to protect myself, I have to protect my family. Even if you have something to fall back on, it just doesn't seem like that's like always the best option to take the risk, even if it might be the more interesting thing. I feel like we have evolved to the point where we like to take risks more now than we used to before because things are changing so fast, and now more than ever, risks are safe, or rather, they're safer than they ever have been. Because now, if I want to go, start my own business, then the skills that I learned from doing that would build
Right.
my resume and my skill level to the point where even if it doesn't work out, I can always go back and still get a job, right? And I'll be fine because that's just the way that things are now. So where it's easier for us to take these risks nowadays. But for some, just because of the way that our brains are wired, our first our initial thought is always to take the safest route.
Right. It's just I guess this is just a matter for a lot of people. It's a matter of balancing their risk. Because like for some people, like they see how far they can land, but like if they don't stick the landing, they'll crash and burn everything they've had so far. They'll lose, right? But like if you're at a point where you're just like, if I crash and burn, I'm still at the same spot I was right now, then you're more likely to take that risk. Or if you know that you have that second wind, like you will, even if you don't make it quite as far as you thought you would, you'll still stick the landing somewhere further along than you are now. You're more likely to go ahead and take that leap.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And now to think of this in a way that it can actually benefit people. We always see people that are not in great situations. They're on welfare. They're going to shelters to get food. Like food kitchens, and then they're sleeping in shelters. So these people seemingly, and of course I don't have the best knowledge on this subject, which is why I'm asking, but these people don't, it doesn't seem like they have anything to lose, because they aren't, like they're already receiving everything from an outside source. So they can take the chance, if anything, they'll just fall back to where they are. But somebody in that situation that's on welfare, that's, but and they can, fall back exactly to where they are now. What's really keeping them from taking not really a risk even. I mean, what's the lack of motivation? I mean, would it simply mean just telling
Yeah,
them that, you know, you can take this chance and you don't really have anything to lose, or is it something
I
bigger?
guess it's just helping them realize that I guess yeah, they have nothing to lose, but like uh that the ceiling is a lot higher than they uh might think it is. And along with that, you know, from where they see it, they could get it, they could get even they could get even lower than where they are now if they do go for that, or that they've been they've been at that bottom for so long that it's hard to it's hard to get up to that ceiling that they supposedly have.
Yeah, it just doesn't look like it sometimes for someone in that situation because, when you have lived in like a bad situation for your whole life, and everyone around you has had a similar situation, a similar story, and you've lived your entire life in a shelter or in a lower income area, and you've had to get food from someone else who's struggled so much, and someone else comes up to you and tells you that you have this chance to make things better. Things can become better for you. Then you look at them and you sort of think like they don't really know what I've been through. They don't see where I came from. They don't understand. So how are they going to tell me that I can do something bigger?
Yeah, because they're pointing out a horizon from a different part, from basically a different part of it's like you're somewhere that's been really dusty and cloudy for so long, and someone from somewhere else tells you there's a horizon somewhere. You're not really gonna believe them because they're not looking at it from where you are.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing to help someone out with anything when you just haven't seen it from their perspective. But I do believe that's all the time that we have.
All right.
And I'm incredibly excited for our guest today. His name is Daniel, and we'll introduce him when we're back.
Yeah, he and yeah, so cue musical intro that he actually performed for us. All right, hello everyone, welcome back. Here's Daniel. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself, Daniel?
Oh, hello, I'm Daniel. I go to Northwestern. I'm a junior. What else about myself? Um, I used to go to Plano West. I play piano. There's a lot of other things about myself. What else?
Well, I guess we could start with you playing piano. You actually did our outro and transition music. So,
Yeah, so that was by Bill Evans. It wasn't my own composition, but I just played it. He's a jazz pianist, one of my favorite jazz pianists. So yeah, I think it was his improv. I I really want to get into composition, but I've only really composed one piece called Drunken Llama. If
okay.
Umar remembers.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah,
I would love to hear that.
I believe it's on YouTube.
it's very chaotic.
We'll link it in the description.
Yeah, check it out.
Awesome. So, when did you start playing piano?
Um, well, I started learning when I was 7, but I hmm, I really only got into it like late middle school. That's when I like really started focusing on it. Yeah. Oh, and I forgot to mention I'm majoring in piano and econ. So
Oh,
yeah, I'm pretty deep into piano, I guess, right now.
Oh, that's really cool. So do you have any like big plans or big dreams with music?
Hmm, it's right now I'm sort of on a cusp, crossroads about what I want to do with my life because I'm a double major and like if you really want to commit yourself to something and have dreams, it's really hard to do like a bunch of different things.
Right.
Um, I'd say it depends on when you ask me, and it depends on like what time of the day you ask me. Because sometimes I'm like very, very passionate. Sometimes like at 4 a.m. I'm like orgasming at the piano and like just like crying and like I'm just so emotional. And at that moment, if you asked me like what I want to do with my life, I would say piano.
Right.
But then sometimes I like just like very sick of piano. Like it just seems like I won't be able to do this for the rest of my life. And I'm just like,
I think that
maybe this is just something I do um once in a while. I get really into it, but I don't know how much I can make a career out of it, you know? So
right. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think it's that way with a lot of dreams and creative outlets. Like sometimes, like there'll be times where you're just like, yeah, I love this. It's all I want to do. Other times
yeah.
you're just like, all right, I hate this. Throws pencil across the room.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy to do, but I think that's what makes it so special to us. When you are able to do something that you know is difficult, generally, but you've put in the practice and the time and the effort, and it actually comes out and becomes something that is really good because you put in the time and the effort into it. It's what makes it really satisfying, and those are the moments where you feel like, this is actually something that I love.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see where this takes you. We will watch your career with great interest.
Thank you.
Did you understand that reference? I
Mm.
just want to gauge how much of a nerd you are.
There was a reference. Wait, what was the reference? No, no, no. Maybe I just missed it.
it was a Star Wars reference.
The I'll watch your career with great interest.
Yeah, yeah, there it is.
Frick. No, that sounded very interesting. I was like, it sounded like you
I know it was just a line.
did something with
It was just
that.
a line from the prequels.
What was the what would
The Palpatine just says, "We'll watch your career with great interest." He says it's Anakin.
oh okay.
Yeah, that's okay. You're forgiven this time.
Lol. Yeah.
So I guess we'll get into the interesting. So what's interesting about this episode is Daniel actually wrote a lot of the questions. Well, what was interesting in the first place is that this is actually my first time meeting Daniel, despite knowing of him for like 4 years now, maybe five, because he's been friends with Umar for that long, and I've only met him at school like once, I think, maybe.
Yeah, it's just really weird. I just don't understand how this took so long to
Yeah,
happen.
I think that one
Yeah.
meeting at school was about it. But nonetheless, I am very excited for this and very excited for the
Yeah.
questions. So without further ado, let's get into the first one, which I think is very interesting.
Oh boy.
Are all values based on faith in something?
Mm. Okay, yes. So the reason I was thinking about this was because a lot of things happened in my life in the past year, and like I sort of had a couple of deaths of my own values that I previously had, and I just hmm, oh, I'll give you an example, I guess. I don't know how personal I should get though, but um
That's completely up to you, man.
I guess like philosophies of life, they're all based on like I mean, philosophies of life, they tell you like what you should do in life, and that's always based on a value of like what's important in life. Um, but aside from things that are important because they satisfy you. Like, for example, like you need money, I guess, because you need food and stability. Beside, and like, I don't know what else. You need exercise because it keeps you healthy, blah, blah, blah. But like values, like what are things that are actually like inherently meaningful in life? I feel like it's hard to say other than just whatever you put your faith in, I guess. You know, like some people put values in um, humanitarianism. Some people put values in like God. Some people put values in like I don't know what other values. You get what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah, I definitely get what you're saying. And I actually really like this question because for me personally, like I always try to come back to my values when I'm doing something, like right before I'm about to go work out or, film a podcast or take a cold shower, even.
cool job.
Um, I like to think like, okay, why am I doing this? And at the end of the day, that boils down to, like I value these things because of my faith, right? I value these things because okay, if it's going to make me better, then that pushes me closer to my goals, right? Because like if I'm learning from something and I get smarter because of it, then I'm closer to reaching my goal. Therefore I value this learning or this experience, that it is going to benefit me because it pushes me further towards my goal, and my goals are generally based on my faith. I want to help people in the world, and that's because of the faith that I have. So having that really, like, I guess it makes me value certain things more than others because they're beneficial to me, and sometimes they're directly beneficial to other people. And so that is what pushes me to in a sense do a lot of the things that I do. Even this podcast to an extent is a value because of my faith, because I learn a lot from the guests that we have on this. I learn a lot just by doing this, and so that in the end pushes me closer to my goals. Obviously I enjoy what I'm doing. I enjoy being here and a lot of the other things that I'm doing, which is why it's a sustainable value to have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's super important because when you're trying to stick to something, it really has to be a sustainable solution. So I do think that I
Mm.
value things because of
What
faith.
do you mean by faith? Do you mean like religious faith, like some kind of metaphysical faith, or just like trust in
I
whatever, like
think
specifically?
it depends on the person. For me personally, it's religious faith, but I would totally understand if someone is believing in something metaphysical that gives them value,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes you just feel that there is some higher purpose, right, and that guides you. That could be your north star, that pushes you towards your goals. For example, one thing I find really interesting is Taoism, because when people believe in that,
Mm-hmm.
generally the belief in Taoism is a lot of the time you just let things be the way that they are, right? You just go with the flow in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally understand that because that's a good way to be happy. Just that understanding that things will be as they are, not wanting to change certain things because that's how the world is, and just leaving it that way. There could be people like that want to change the world, and want to do more, but at its core, they want to believe that so that they can be at peace within their own minds. And that's why like I obviously don't hold this belief because I think that I should be more focused on changing the world rather than letting it be the way that it is. But, yeah, like I see where Taoism is coming from, and I definitely think it's more of a philosophical ideology than religious, but it definitely changes what you value.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Amr, do you have anything? You wanted
uh,
to come in.
I think a lot of my views are the same. That I think all values are rooted in faith of something. Like for a lot of people, that's a religion across different religions, but for a lot of people, it's faith in their own life philosophy. If they don't really have that religious inclination, uh,
Mm-hmm.
but like everyone has values like those, and they're rooted in faith of something, right? Even even if someone's like a serial killer, they have values. They have incredibly different values. Uh, but like they have values. They have values because of their faith that their personal belief system is, as twisted as it may be, that they have faith that their personal belief system is true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the thing
For
is,
me, I would
with
say,
that. No, go ahead.
okay. So a big thing that I was like thinking about was I think I placed a lot of faith in the good of doing good in the world, I guess. Um, but I guess if you think very fundamentally about where that comes from, you could say, okay, back to evolution. Like we need to help our own tribe because, that's going to benefit us to like work together, etc. And then um, even just observing our own thoughts and our feelings, we feel better when we help others. So in a sense, it's actually still selfish. And so is that really uh, an inherent meaning or an inherent good if it's simply meant to be just something that you feel good doing? But
No, I get
I'm
what
not
you're,
I'm not sure.
I get what you're trying to say because even like religiously, for Christians, Muslims, Jews, all of us that follow religion, we do good things
Mhm.
so that we can, like benefit from it, and in the afterlife we want to go to heaven. So sometimes I think, like, am I doing this good so that at the end of the day, like, I can benefit from that, or am I doing it truly out of love, for the person that I'm helping, or like the good act that I'm doing. But I feel like it is a little bit different in the sense that like the benefit that I'm receiving from this is in a different world. So I, again, like, I have to have faith. I have to have faith to have this value. That's going to help me. But I think that, like, just the worldly benefit would be feeling a little good, and I think that, like, that's if that's all that you would get out of it, then are you really, like, would anyone just do a good act to just feel good about it? I think it means more to you when you have that higher purpose, and you're trying to actually like get
Mhm.
somewhere in the
Yeah,
next
but
the next world. And that, I don't think just feeling good is enough motivation.
mm,
Right, and I feel like if you're not doing it for any sort of really tangible benefits, like you don't like for the volunteering you do at the hospital, you don't get money out of it. You don't really you're never you're not gonna see like 90% of these volunteers or people
mhm.
outside of when you go to volunteer, right? You don't get really any social standing. You just sort of do it. You come back home. No one talks to
Yeah.
you before or after. It just happens. You might feel a little bit good about yourself, but you don't really get any tangible benefits. Or like, you might or like even helping a friend out, like you do something good, and I guess you do get the tangible benefit in increasing your friendship, right?
Mhm.
But like, but that's still doing good because you're doing good towards like increasing because friendship is a value you hold, and you're doing more towards
Yeah.
that, right? So you're still doing good.
Yeah. I think that there actually is a distinction. I was just thinking about it right now. Um, there is a distinction in terms of your intention. If you're going in thinking, okay, I'm only helping this person because I know I will feel bad afterwards, or like I'll feel bad afterwards if I don't help them. Like I'll feel guilty, and like you only care about the fact that you will feel guilty, not actually like inherently the fact that they will not be helped. So, or if you're going into something just to feel good doing it, like I guess fundamentally you can break everything down into like just like the economic utilities that you gain. I guess like you can model it in that way, or you can model it in terms of like neurochemically the reward system, whatever. But um on a conceptual level,
like if I help this woman out, I'll get about 3.5 times the amount of dopamine as usual.
Yeah, but I think it just depends on like your intention and your belief about what you're actually trying to do.
Yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying there because, generally I feel like we go into these things and try to do good to uphold our values, right? And once you go into it and you say that, like, I did this because it's a good thing, that's when you start to feel good about what you've done, right? And so if that is the reason that, like, I'm feeling, I feel that this is a good thing that I've done, so that's why I feel good, then we wouldn't even feel good about doing it
Mhm.
if you just go in with the intention of just trying to feel good. So that faith, that value behind it, I guess, has to be there. That love of actually doing it has to be there before you can really,
Mhm.
feel good about doing it.
Mhm. Yeah. That's sort of why like I mentioned this question actually. We got to the origin of the question, which is like you have to believe that you're not doing this for yourself. Like even if you can really be completely honest and like I honestly I'm not religious, so I honestly do kind of think that if you really pay attention to your own psyche, you would eventually get to the point that it's still kind of selfish. Like
Yeah.
even like you said, it's like if you do it for a higher purpose, like you will feel a lot better. So like you can always dissect it to like a selfish reason, but by doing that, you will not get the benefit of, like you sort of have to believe that you're not doing it for yourself in order to feel good. It's like kind of paradoxical. So
Yeah, if you
values,
overthink it, you're not going to enjoy it.
yeah. So you have to sort of like ignore that in a sense and believe in the good, I think, in order to have that kind of value of good.
Yeah. And I think it does boil down to, like you said, not doing it for a selfish reason, because at that point you aren't doing it for anyone else, so you don't have any reason to feel good about it. And even religiously, we're taught not to do it for ourselves, even though, like, you do good deeds so that you can, make it to heaven in the afterlife. That isn't the perspective that we're taught. We're generally taught, like, be a good person, do this out of your genuine love for people, and your belief in God. And if you do these good things, then you will be rewarded in the afterlife. You'll be rewarded for doing these good things, with heaven. And that is generally like how we're taught to believe, like, okay, you're doing this as a genuine good thing, because again, they're two separate worlds. I'm in this world right now to
Mm-hmm.
do good over here, and I have that faith that God will reward me. But that's not really just for, doing it for heaven. It's for doing it out of my actual love.
Yeah, exactly,
Like
exactly.
doing it for my love of people, for my love of God. That is the reason behind doing these good acts, right? And you can even tell, when you ask someone how their day's going, and you see their smile on their face, and that makes you feel good. But if you're just doing it like, oh, I just want to get to heaven for this, and then you go up to someone and you're like, how was your day? And they're like, good, I guess. Like, they can even tell that it's a little ingenuine when you're not, like, when you're not doing it, for them. You don't actually care about their day. They'd be able to tell that you don't actually care, so you have to do it, actually caring for others.
Hmm.
That has to be your intention.
Yeah, exactly. Hmm.
So
And then, uh,
yeah.
yeah, I guess we can move on to a different question.
Yeah, now
Uh,
we're going in circles.
yeah. So, let's see. One of the questions you had was, are all dichotomies inherently
Oh.
non-dual? I thought that was an interesting one.
Oh my gosh, this is
Yeah, I actually remember when I saw this one,
just
and yeah, I'm gonna need a little.
okay. I don't know. This is kind of just like a really wild question.
Yeah, the question is, are all dichotomies inherently non-dual? I'm gonna need some background here.
So like my friend Kevin and I were talking about just like hmm, nature versus humans, or like what is natural and what is artificial, and we sort of couldn't find a line, between actual nature and actual humans, because like humans are part of nature, I guess. So like that's an example of something that is, there's a dichotomy, but there really isn't a line between it. So like, are all dichotomies, in a sense, like if you dig to the most fundamental level, a spectrum,
I,
or
I mean,
there's no line?
yeah, we were talking about something similar earlier. Basically, like about science and art. Like a lot of the times we think that they're on opposite spectrums, right? But like thinking about it, a lot of the time, science is how like a lot of the skills and tools you use to express yourself creatively are science.
Yeah, but
Mm-hmm.
the thing with art and science is I do think something can be both art and science at the same time, but I don't think something can be both artificial and natural at the same time, you know. But where do you draw that line is the real question. And, like if you take the bumper of a car, right, and you say that, like, okay, well, you break it down where the plastic came from and everything. I mean, at some point it was natural, right? And it was molded into the shape that it is right now. But if you break down all the components, then at some point it was natural. Like even this can right over here, right? This at some point was metal, and then they got whatever they used to make it. Then like at some point that was natural too. But if I were to take a piece of metal, right, and mold, like melt it down and mold it into something else, is that now artificial because it had been touched by human hands, or is that still natural at that point?
Mm-hmm.
I
Hmm.
guess.
Yeah, I guess
Like,
the thing about this is that, about this question in general, is that you do have a sense at the far ends of the spectrum whether it is artificial or natural. Like if I say this computer is artificial, you'd say, okay, it's artificial, right? But if you keep going to the middle and try to find that line, it's like very hard to make. And like, is that true for everything? Like, no matter how clear the line may seem, like if you really dissect it, can you actually find a point where you're like, okay, the line doesn't exist? So for example, like the metal example, you gave a very clear example. If I got a piece of wood and like smashed it in half, like would that be artificial now? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I think
It's a weird
if you're
line.
if, okay, if you're saying like, okay, human had an impact on this, they smashed it, and that is why this is now artificial, which I don't think is true really, but I guess I don't.
I think the I don't know. I think the distinction is just what would have happened if you know, if we didn't exert free will on it. Our because like as humans we have free will and intelligence that animals don't, right? At least not to the same degree.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where the distinction lies. Like if you just let things take their course without greatly interfering, I think that's what's natural. But like if we do have a profound impact because of our higher understanding, intelligence, and free will, then I think that's what where you sort of distinguish that.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to just go up to a tree and pick an apple off of that tree, it's not like, okay, this tree is artificial now, you know? Because, I
Because
mean,
an animal
it
could
could
have
have
done
fallen, or an
because
animal.
an animal could have done that, or the apple could have fallen on its own and just rotted away.
Mm-hmm.
Like the
Yeah.
apple disappearing and getting consumed isn't something that's unnatural.
I guess
Mm-hmm.
our idea of nature is very based on how animals act, and not how we act, since we are very different from most other animals. So what we do is
Mm-hmm.
artificial.
What about chimps making like tools, I guess, like wooden clubs or stone, like to kill their prey?
maybe a bit more
Oh, I don't know if
complex than
chimps
that.
hunt. No, I don't know.
I
Because
don't. I think that's interesting actually. I guess if I think that the chimps are doing it, then at that point I would say that it's natural. I guess because they don't really
I'd
have
consider
free will.
I consider that natural.
Yeah,
Though we could get into a discussion about free will.
let's do it. I'm
I
down.
think no one has free will.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think it's possible even to conceptualize of a theoretical anything theoretical to have free will.
Why's that?
Yeah. Well, it depends on what you define as free will. Well, I don't. Oh shoot! I clicked on something. Okay.
he's
Oops.
gone.
So, um,
Did you have
how do I
free
put
will then,
this?
Daniel?
No, I did not. Um, if if you trace back any action or thought, uh, or just any event in nature, including our own behavior, you can always trace it to some prior cause or from randomness. If
Hmm.
you believe, well, according to quantum physics, there's randomness when you like look peer really deep into a particle. You can't like actually deterministically predict like in the Newtonian physics. Um, but so you have like causation and randomness as like the two forces in causing events to happen, right? So if you apply that to our own bodies and our own brains, then you can always trace it back to some prior cause up until before you were born, or just your environment, which is not your choice. And so you can always like attribute a decision onto something else that is not you.
I
And
think
so
even like with unlike most animals and particles in existence, if you're talking about a human being, you can put, I believe, two exactly people two people in the exact same situation, and they could be like the exact same person, almost like have like almost the exact same traits, maybe even the exact same, and they to make two like completely different decisions. Their lives go completely two completely different ways. I think that's definitely possible, and that's because they have the choice, in any given moment to do something different. Like, for example, if Omar and I were the exact same person, right, and I lived in Saudi Arabia and New Jersey as well, and we both come over here and we've lived the exact same lives up to that point, and we're pretty much the exact same person. Um, you know, we could both go on two completely different paths, and we could do something completely different with our lives, even up to that point, because we have the choice to do that, right? So I think, like if someone were to come to us and say, like, oh, you can be an athlete if you wanted to, right? And I'm more interested in that. And so, or somebody came up to us and said, like, oh, you can be a big author, then like Omer would be more interested in that, then like we still have the choice to make those
mhm.
different decisions. um, would you attribute that to like how the brain is wired, or just free will?
Well, I actually think there's like no distinction between like choice and just whatever happens like in the universe. So like um I actually agree with your example. Like you could choose something completely different even if you're like born and raised exactly the same way. I would even say if you maybe replay the universe and literally like not a single atom was changed, right? There still could be a possibility of choosing something else, right? And then you would say that is caused by free will. But I would say, let's say you do decide to choose something else. Uh, what would be the impetus for that? Like, if you really observe your own choices, it's just like a impulse that spontaneously arises in your consciousness. And even if you say, okay, I planned to do this, or like I thought very carefully about this. Why did you choose to think very carefully about this? You can always go back, like then you say, oh, because um this is very important to me, like that's why like I thought very carefully about this. Then you can say like, what made you care so much about this? Like you can never get to a place that was not determined outside of yourself.
Yeah, it does feel like it was determined a lot of the time. Like, when you talk about that coin flip, when, like you pretty much know what you want before the coin lands. It's not about where it lands, it's about what you wanted in your head before it landed when the coin was in the air. It feels like, okay, that came to me for some reason. Right? It's very interesting that, okay, yeah, this thought came into my head. And even at the point where you would plan something out very carefully, you thought about it, there was some reason behind why you wanted to do what you wanted, why you wanted to make the decision that you wanted to make. I get that, I get exactly what you're saying there, but I do think, and this may be a very basic understanding of what choice is, but I do
Mhm.
think that, like, in that moment, you do have the choice to go either way, right? So, I guess, if you really think about it, though, like, if you go really, really deep into it, then I guess it wasn't a
Yeah,
choice
yeah.
because it was determined. You already thought about it, you planned it, and so things were
Hmm.
going to go a certain way. I do believe that things were meant to happen a certain way. I do think that, like, everything was meant to be a certain way, but I do think that, yeah, if you really think about it, then it might seem like you don't really have that choice because it was due to an external factor. I guess it depends on how deeply you think about it again. Like, where are you drawing the line between it being an external factor, between like
Hmm.
some that decision just coming to you, or whether I actually made that choice in that moment. Because
I
is it
think the
really?
practical reason I'm deciding, or I'm questioning this even, is just like exactly where do you draw the line between your choice and an exterior reason? And this is very important when like considering where to place blame on people, and like uh blaming yourself in the past. Like for example, the UT Austin shooter, the guy who went up to the tower and like, yeah. So apparently, he was actually like a very kind, caring, like father and husband. And like one day, like not one day, but just like out of nowhere, he started going crazy, and like he even wrote like this letter, like I have to do this for some reason. There's something telling me I have to do this. And then like, he completely changed. He got a gun and then killed a bunch of people, right? And then later they found out in the autopsy that he had a brain tumor, you know? So did that guy have free will? Most people would say no, because it was the tumor, right? That caused him to want to kill people. But why doesn't that apply to people who are naturally born with psychopathic tendencies? They didn't choose to be psychopathic in the same way that that guy did not choose to have a tumor. And you can apply this logic to any choice you make. And so, is it really logical to blame people on a moral level? That's the biggest issue.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think. Yeah, Omar, go ahead.
I think the like when you can blame people is when when you can tell that they have a semblance of what's going on, and control, general control of how they react to things. Because like I guess someone who's uh a psychopath, uh he does will have those tendencies, but like if they really have the choice to, if they really, you can tell that they have the choice to act on those tendencies or not, is when you can you can put the blame on them.
Yeah, I really think, when you're talking about this, you have to consider, like, okay, when someone did something that was wrong, in any case, did they have the choice to, like, when they were in that moment and they made that decision, did they have the choice to go back and do the right thing, and like, not actually do it? Like, if I were to just punch Umar right now, is that like
Mm-hmm.
I had the choice to not do that, so you should put the blame on me, right? I had that option. It wasn't like, yeah, the impulse came to me to do it. Maybe, and for a lot of people, the impulse comes there, but they
Yeah.
always have that option to opt out of it and not actually do that. So, and if you don't think that they have that choice, then you would blame them. But it really boils down to like, okay, well, did they have the option to not do it in that
This
moment?
is
You know, do you,
I
yeah,
was just gonna say, like, this is also like the question, is there really a dichotomy? Like, can you draw the line?
yeah,
Um, because I actually do still blame people, even though I'm saying that I don't believe in free will, because I have this vague sense that like something is more of a choice than other things. But I can't exactly draw the line, and they are actually you can't draw the line. It's just, I guess, like, how, if we don't draw the line, we're sort of just basing our blame, or we're sort of deciding whether someone should be responsible for something simply based on our own gut feeling of what is their choice or not, I guess. But you can't really draw the line. So it's almost just like our weird humanistic
yeah.
tendencies,
That's
I
why we have to
guess.
try and
Uh, I don't
that's why we
know.
have to try and understand where people are coming from, really. Because if someone makes a decision that I don't agree with, then I could immediately blame them for what they did, right? Or I could sit and listen and try to see like why they made their decision, try to see where they were coming from, and if you're able to convince me that they had good reason to do it, then I would say like, okay, I don't blame you anymore. Or even if they were able to get me to the point where maybe I don't agree with the decision that was made, but I can understand why they made that decision, because maybe I wasn't in that situation, so might not be able to truly understand where they're coming from. But it's important for me to at least try to like gauge why they made the decision that they made, because once I'm able to do that, then I can truly like, then I have the authority to say whether this person should be blamed or not. Otherwise, you can't just say that like this person deserved to be blamed without knowing why they did what they did.
Hmm.
You have to try and see first. You have to let them explain their side, and that comes down to like, okay, well, did they have the
Yeah.
choice, and if they did have the choice, then like, was it the right
Yeah.
choice, you know? So,
Alright. And well, I guess we have time for one more question. This is one I thought was interesting. Yeah, you asked if it was futile to try to make sense of the world in our minds. So I guess this is a good note to end off of.
I think we sort of just got to that point already, actually, in discussion of free will.
I guess
Because
I guess our
if we
minds,
go,
but like, yeah, I guess that's true.
yeah, I
Uh,
mean, like, you can always cut things up fundamentally and understand in like so many different situations that like there is no real line between like immoral and moral. There's no real line between choice and free will and the illusion of free will, whatever. There's no line between artificial and natural necessarily, conceptually, but we function with a vague sense that the dichotomies exist. And so, like, does it really matter if I mean, should we even try to cut it up and figure it out if we still function with just like this feeling of what is right or wrong, blah, blah, blah?
I think I
And
think
then
I think
continue,
we
never
as
mind.
yeah, because we can function even if we don't really understand how the world works or what's really going on. But I think as human, because like you'll never completely understand you'll never completely understand how the world works just because of how much there is and and how many concepts and ideas work in the world. But I think as humans, we just try to do our best to understand what we can of it, and just try to understand it enough to help us move forward and just keep functioning the best we can.
Yeah, I do think that it's you know important for us, like you said, to have scales in our head of like the spectrum of these dichotomies that we just discussed. It's important for us to have those in our heads just so that we can visualize them and understand them, and actually have these conversations. It's important, um, and when we talk about it, it's difficult to actually find out where that line is, but in our heads we do draw that line, right? It is there somewhere, we just don't know exactly where that line is. And I think that it's important that it is there in our heads. It's different for everyone, obviously, but to say that it's futile to try and find it, I guess you could say that there's really no point
I
because
think that is also an extent. It is futile
yeah,
to some extent.
that's true.
To
That's
which
true.
extent we don't know. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
totally understandable. Like that's exactly true. When you're trying to find these lines, you can go like very, very deep into it, and you can say that like when I'm trying to create art, okay, like an image came into my head, I saw it before it happened. At that point, like that's creative. You would consider that something that's a creative thought that I had. But if you break it down, then yeah, like some chemicals moved around in my brain, particles did their thing, and that ended up coming to me. So it was, like again, it wasn't even my choice, right? So back to free will. But also, was that art, or was that just the science in my brain that was working in such a way that led me to have this idea, right? So, or you could even say like when you could go on either side. You could say that when Newton was sitting under the tree and that apple fell right onto his head, was that like he started doing all this work on it when by chance the apple fell onto his head, and he started doing this work, and to him maybe at that point it was art because he really enjoyed it and he thought that it was creative to create something entirely new, which was his version of physics. So yeah, I mean, you'll always go back and forth, but to say that it's futile, trying to come to an answer, I mean, what fun would philosophy be if we could come to an answer?
Hmm. Yeah. I sort of reached the conclusion, sort of, that like everything is actually just your feeling. Like when it really comes down to it, like even philosophers, when they disagree, it sort of is like just their
I mean,
instinct to some level.
yeah, I think that's
And
like too much. I think it's it's no fun, and you can never really boil the whole world and all its concepts down to just logical, cold, hard facts. Uh, and so I don't think there's much point in like you can use science and stuff to understand as much as the world as you can in its physical form, but the rest of it, yes, we don't none of it. But for the rest of it, the vague stuff, the less tangible stuff, none of us really have an absolute answer for all that. So, I think it's important for us to just accept that and to just, understand that our our, our personal understandings of all that and are constantly evolving, and our understandings of it now and future are both valid, and they'll continue to evolve and change.
Yeah. And since we're running out of time, as a parting note, Daniel, is there any advice that you would like to give to someone that's maybe struggling to find out what they want to do in life, and they're deciding between their passion and what they consider to be realistic, or any decision that they're trying to make? Is there any advice that you have out there for someone that's struggling trying to make that decision?
well, I would ask someone else for advice for the same exact questions because that's what I'm pondering, and that's something that I don't know if I could really give advice about because I don't have it figured out myself. But let's see. Um, I would say if you're conflicted about what you want to pursue, it's best to just try things out. And like, because in your mind, if you try to like figure out what you want to do just based on your past experience, uh, it's not enough. Like, you're not going to get there. It's better to just like try it out and like see how you feel rather than try to predict how you will feel, sort of. And also, I actually think that like we have a tendency, because of so much choice that we have, that we have between different like career options and whatever, we have like a paralysis of choice, like that applies to like everything, like buying products, whatever. So I think we have a tendency to feel that the grass is greener on the other side, but it might just be better to just find something that you are interested in. It might not be the thing that you're most interested in, and then just like go with it and like really try hard on it. Even if you know theoretically there's probably a subject that is more of your optimal subject, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's just a process that you really have to enjoy and, try things out and find out what you like.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Daniel.
Thanks
And
for having me.
and definitely do check out his composition in the link below. And be sure to follow us as always at a cup of coffee pod on Instagram and Twitter, or email us at acupofcoffeepod@gmail.com if you have any questions. Just send us an email, DM us on Twitter or Instagram if you want to be on the podcast or just are curious. Um, Definitely do check out our other episodes as well sometime in the future, and I hope you all enjoyed this one. Cue outro.